Welcome to another edition of Truth Talks Radio. In part one, we were talking about how private is your info in reference to doxing and how do the doxers get your information. They get it from more than likely your Facebook, your Twitter, any internet venue, social media venue that you put out your private information on a public forum. They can get it from that. They can get it from the white pages. Any type of social network where they can glean public information. And unless you request that your number is to be private, they can get your phone number. And for someone on this network that I'm speaking on to say that it's a crime to post this information, this public information, it's a crime, they're going to get you, the FBI is going to get you, when he himself has done the very same thing. In my chat room the other night, I'll have to get the name of the program, Guy Shea was in my chat room, and it linked up with his real account, spamming the crap out of my chat room. I was perplexed. And I talked to him throughout the show. Why are you doing this? He even threatened the lives of the people in my chat room. It was over and beyond. Just, wow. But in this session that I want to talk about, I want to talk about SABU, Jeremy Hammond, and Vince in the Bay. I want to remind people where all this can go to, and that's a federal court. But we're talking about hacking into companies' mainframes. We're not talking about doxing. I think someone is very confused on Spreaker and is trying to spread fear. And I think that is wrong. So why don't we talk a little bit about Vince in the Bay and SABU? I think you need to know a little background on BTR. Everybody pretty much knew what was going on. Let me look for the site. On Vince in the Bay had a podcast on Blog Talk Radio, and he was known as Vince in the Bay, and he had a number of anonymous people on there speaking their mind, talking about change. You can hear a lot about this on Motherboard. It's a site. I think it's pretty well versed as far as the history of Anonymous and that stuff. And Lulsec, I can't say it. Lulz and then SEC, SEC. It's a hacking group. And one of the main groups of Lulsec was SABU. SABU's real name is Hector Xavier Monsegur. He started working for the FBI after he was arrested in June of 2011. So this goes back a few years. A law enforcement source confirmed that SABU had been a human source for the FBI. I will refer to him as SABU. That's who I had talked to on the Vince in the Bay podcast, which I was on frequently and then not so frequently once Anonymous showed up because they made me nervous. They did. They made me nervous. I'm like, oh. And I thought they were really far out there using radical methods, and I really didn't want to be associated with it. And in Vince's defense, my understanding is that some of them were even sleeping on the floor in front of his apartment door to get him to become more involved. And I've heard a lot of different stories to the similar. He got heavily involved with Anonymous, is my opinion, from his podcasts and from conversations on Tiny Chat. And I don't know, don't go on Tiny Chat unless your computer is really protected, by the way. So Tiny Chat's another social platform. So let's talk about SABU. Wow. I did not know that. I'm reading something here. They're talking about when they had hacked Fox, they exposed over 70,000 confidential details of potential X Factor contestants. The Sony hack exposed confidential data on 100,000 users of the Sony's website. Wow. So SABU pleaded guilty to hacking charges on August 15, 2011. So, of course, he's going to try to make a deal. I didn't realize there was that many. Wow. See, that's what I didn't. Good, basically. Wow. Get a group into trouble. I think SABU is one of those factions. Wow. It up to 860,000 people. Wow. Of course, they were also alleged to have stolen credit card information on 60,000 users of the intelligence company and accused of using data to steal 700,000. Wow. Well, that was Jeremy Hammond, and he was pretty much set up by SABU, who was another leader of LulzSec. So what I would really like to talk about is when Jeremy Hammond went to court and he was convicted. He was definitely convicted. And it was a crazy, crazy scenario at this place. And Vince in the Bay, a podcaster from Blog Talk Radio, who I'm trying to get to come over here just to clear the matter up so he can live more of a normal life. He testified in Jeremy Hammond's case. At one point, they had said, are there any victims of Jeremy Hammond? Let me pull that up real quick and get the judge's exact words. There was some crazy nut job that believed the FBI was taking his family, and he was escorted out of the courtroom. There was 40 West cadets that were there to watch this particular case as part of their training to become a West Point cadet. So there's 40 people there on one side, and then the other side are Jeremy Hammond supporters. I mean, it's just a bizarre case. No one was allowed to take electronics in with them. Even cell phones had to be checked into cubbies provided by the court. And most of the crowd was in support of Hammond. But I just think it's funny that they had all these gray uniformed cadets from the West Point Academy. That's bizarre. And it was a field trip. They were here to learn about constitutional and military law. They do differ. Wow. So, of course, someone smarted off, well, which one is this, military or constitutional? The Chief Justice was Loretta A. Preska. She entered the room and asked us to sit down, is what, we find his name. It's from Motherboard, if you want to go listen, or go read, rather. It's really cool. I think it's written well, but he is a supporter of Jeremy Hammond, and knowing that, it's a little bit slanted. Trying to get my computer to scroll down. One of Hammond's popular statements that is quoted often in his defense in breaking the law, but it's still a law, mind you. He said, yes, I broke the law, but I believe that sometimes laws must be broken in order to make room for change. Well, if he wants to make room for change, then he also must be sentenced in my viewpoint, which he was. I believe it was 10 years, federal time, mind you, with 3 years supervised after that. So he's still currently in prison at this time. Judge Preska asked Hammond if he'd like to speak in his own behalf. So he stood. and approached the podium. In a statement, Hammond detailed his cooperation and work with SABU. The guy I talked about that had been on Vince in the Bay. Also, Jeremy Hammond had been on Vince in the Bay also. If you go to Blog Talk Radio, go to Vince in the Bay, look at the archives. I don't know if all those are still there, but it would be an interesting listen, would it not? He would have all these anonymous people in there. And I was in there maybe 2010, part of 2011, and then bowed out because I'm like, that made me so nervous, just speaking from my perspective. But I don't know. How do you feel about snitches? How do you feel about snitches? And then, of course, Judge Preska at one point said, are there any victims? If you weren't aware, Preska is married to Thomas Jane Cavalier, an employee of Cawley, Gordon, and Rendell, LLP, a Stratford client and associate, thus a victim. I think the judge should have recused herself since she was affiliated with a victim that was directly affected by Jeremy Hammond's work, or Lowell's SEC work. It's just crazy. All right. Do you have any idea why the judge would not recuse herself? Well, of course. So she goes, are there any other victims? I am a victim. A man starts to yell from the back of the room. And he was near the West Point cadets. Can you imagine them all turning their head? Like 40 of them in their gray uniforms. I mean, this was just written for TV. But I'll get to the major point I wanted to talk about. This man that said he was a victim said his name was David Suker, S-U-K-E-R. He's a teacher advocate of Occupy Wall Street. He said he was a victim of FBI repression. The judge quickly had security escort the man out of the court, him yelling while being dragged away, I've been under surveillance. I'm having my family taken away. This is what happens when you have all these different people gathered together. You have sane people, intelligent people, the suckers, the dupes, and then you have the really out there, out of touch people like this David guy. So Preska asked again, and she looked annoyed when she said this, if there are any other victims. And then maybe some of you have heard Vince in the Bay. He approached the podium. He stood up and approached the podium. And most people look at it that Vince was trolling Judge Preska for at least 5 minutes. I have his testimony, and that's what we're going to read. You be the judge if Vince in the Bay was trolling the judge. The court. Is there another victim of Mr. Hammond's crime? I'm reading directly from the transcript. Come right up here, sir. Tell me your name, sir. My name is Vincent Louis Tucci. Spell your last name, please. T-O-C-C-E. It's Italian. The court says, thank you. Mr. Tucci. It's pronounced Tucci in Italian. The court. Thank you. How are you a victim of Mr. Hammond's crime? Mr. Tucci. Well, Mr. Hammond's friends have been harassing me online ever since he's been in jail. All right, did you catch that? It's his friends that have been harassing him. Okay, the court. Talk to me. Mr. Tucci. Okay, all right. I'm sorry. The court. It's very hard to hear if you're not in the microphone. Got you. Thank you. First of all, I'm a victim of CFAA myself. I am convicted of a federal crime. I was convicted of a federal crime. I pled guilty to unauthorized access to protect a computer. So I'm kind of familiar with the court. Okay, but tell me how Mr. Hammond's crime affected you. One moment, I need to scroll down. Where is it? Mr. Tucci. Okay, no problem. I'll make it brief. Over the past year, I've gotten to know some of Jeremy's friends, and I've had to change my home phone number. I don't have a home phone number anymore. I don't have a home address. You can look me up on the internet. Try to find where I live. I don't have a house anymore. The court. How did Mr. Hammond's crime affect you, sir? Mr. Tucci. His sympathizers. His sympathizers have been hounding me over a year. I have had my parents' house swatted. Do you know what swatting is? The court. I don't, sir. Sir, if you want me to understand you, I am a victim, Mr. Tucci. The court. Okay, sir. If you want me to understand you, talk to me. Mr. Tucci. You got it. The court. All right. Mr. Tucci. Just me and you? The court. Yes. Mr. Tucci. I apologize. Okay. The court. Now remember, Mr. Hammond's crime was hacking and distributing information. Mr. Tucci. Yes. The court. How did that injure you? Oh, one moment. Now this is on page 4 of the transcript. Mr. Tucci. I was in contact with his colleague, his direct comrade, Hector Xavier Monsieur. And Hector, I spoke with Hector on several occasions. This is my side. Hector is SABU. Hector found out where I was living. He found out he had a woman come to my house and live in my house with me. I had sex with this woman. Now, this is where the audience laughs. I can't even tell you all the stuff that's happened, but let me just say that I had to change my cell phone number. One moment. My cell phone number 5 times. Now I don't have a cell phone number because I'm tired of changing it. Okay? These anonymous people, I'm sorry. These anonymous kids are misguided. They don't understand I understand their frustration. I get it, but I don't think that their message, I don't think they know the right way to get their message across. And it's obvious that they have to resort to harassment to do that, and I don't think that's cool at all. I've gotten to, after I found out what was about Jeremy and Hector, I never knew that Jeremy was one of the people who was harassing me. And I certainly didn't know Hector was. Hector was friendly to me. He was very friendly to me. One moment. And mind you, all these people are on Vince and the Bay's show at this time. My computer is frozen up. I don't know why. If I can get this to work. Well, this is part of the testimony. He goes on to talk about, while I'm waiting for my computer to unfreeze, he goes on to talk about how his parents were squatted, where there was a phone call called in to cause concern enough to, let's see if this one works. Come on. Cause concern to have the SWAT group go out to